She was kicked out because of the color of her skin, denied a chance at justice. But when she returned, as the owner, everything changed. What happened next will shock even the most seasoned. But let's start from the very beginning. The sunlight barely broke through the kitchen window, where Jasmine Turner sat at the table, absorbed in yet another list of job openings. Her hands, worn from long nights and relentless efforts, struggled to move the cursor across the screen. She had long grown accustomed to cruel rejections and a lack of prospects, but today, the feeling of hopelessness was growing stronger. The space around her, old yet cozy, reminded her that she wasn't alone. The dull wallpaper and taped-up windows symbolized her ongoing struggle. However, today was different. The doorbell interrupted her thoughts. Jasmine got up and walked to the door, not expecting to find Mr. Harlan, her landlord, standing there. "Do you have money again, Jasmine?" His voice was cold and aggressive as usual. A white man in his 50s with a narrow face and quick movements, like a predator sensing weakness. I can pay. Just give me some time." She tried to find words that would sound convincing. He entered without asking for permission, loudly stepping into her apartment and scanning the room as though he hadn't seen it in years. When his gaze stopped at a cup of cold tea on the table, he smirked. "Time. I'm tired of your excuses. You're always late, and now it's money. You're out. Pack your things. In a week, you won't be here." Jasmine's heart clenched, but she held his gaze firmly. "That's illegal." Her voice trembled, but the contempt in his eyes told her words wouldn't help. He was certain of his power. "I can sue you. You can't evict me." Mr. Harlan approached the door, not turning to her. "These are my rules, Jasmine. You had your chance. Time's up." He left, leaving behind the smell of cigarettes and an oppressive feeling that Jasmine couldn't shake for a long time. She knew this wasn't just an accident. This was her life, always under threat because of her skin color. But now, everything was about to change. Jasmine sat back down at the table. She pulled an old box of papers from the drawer and retrieved the documents she had been keeping secret. A deal she had been working on for a long time. The purchase of Harlan's building. The secret she had kept was now her salvation. With each passing day, her confidence grew. In a few days, she would unexpectedly become the owner of this place, and Harlan, just a figure from her past. From this moment on, she was no longer just a tenant. In her hands was power she was only beginning to understand. The days passed, and Jasmine felt her strength growing with each one. Every evening, she returned to her small apartment. But in her mind, entirely different pictures were emerging. She was no longer the person who quietly endured under pressure. She was a woman determined to take back everything that had been stolen from her. Her confidence, her right to a future. For the week that followed, Jasmine remained in the shadows, giving Mr. Harlan no reason to doubt her intentions. He continued to march through her apartment, berating her for overdue payments, each time more confident of his victory. Meanwhile, Jasmine immersed herself deeper in the process of buying the building. She signed the final papers and awaited the closing of the deal. As soon as that happened, Harlan would have no control. Today, she walked into his office, taking a step that would change her life. Harlan was sitting at his desk, a look of smug superiority on his face. He glanced at her, not bothering to hide his skepticism. "Well, back again to ask for an extension?" He smirked. "Or are you here to complain to the courts?" Jasmine didn't answer. She pulled an envelope from her bag and placed it in front of him. He stared at it in surprise. "What's this?" he asked, his voice no longer sounding so confident. "This." She paused, watching his reaction. "These are the documents for your building. He frowned, confused. What do you mean? Jasmine looked him squarely in the eyes. I just bought your building, Harlan. I'm the new owner. All your threats no longer matter. I'm no longer your tenant. You're now my debtor. Mr. Harlan's face went pale. He lunged forward, trying to grab the documents, but her hand held them firmly in place. His face turned crimson, his lips quivering with rage, but there was now a flicker of fear in his eyes. You can't! His voice cracked. I'll evict you. I'll do whatever it takes to get you out. You're just a black woman. You don't belong here. Jasmine simply smirked, her gaze steady and her heart full of certainty. You can try, Harlan, but these are my rules now. I took what's rightfully mine. She turned and walked out of his office, leaving him sitting at his desk, his face a mask of shattered disbelief. With each step down the corridor, her confidence grew. She no longer felt weak. Every moment of humiliation, every degrading experience had led her to this point. She was stronger than ever before, and this victory was only the beginning. She was no longer just a woman they tried to break. She was a woman who was breaking the system. The day Jasmine officially became the owner of the building arrived faster than she expected. All the papers were signed, and the deal was done. Now she wasn't just renting a space here. She was in control of the building that had long been a source of her humiliation and fear. The next morning, she walked into her new office. The walls were still bare, but the air was thick with new opportunities. She sat at the desk and booted up her computer, already brainstorming ideas to improve conditions for the tenants and grow her business. Just then, Mr. Harlan called. Jasmine didn't answer right away. She glanced at the screen and saw his number. He was ready to fight to get back what he'd lost. Jasmine smiled as she picked up the phone. Do you think I'll just give up? His voice was filled with rage. You'll regret this. You have no right to run this building. I'll throw you out. Jasmine laughed, but there was no humor in it, only cold confidence. This is no longer your business, Harlan. It's mine now. You can't stop me. The line went silent. He didn't know what to say, and a few seconds later he hung up. That call wasn't just an empty threat. It marked the beginning of a new chapter for Jasmine. She knew she couldn't back down. She had to defend her position. 2 days later, the first tenant, a middle-aged black woman named Chloe, came into her office. Jasmine, I heard you're the owner now. I don't need to tell you how hard things were with Harlan, but if you need anything, I'm here to help. Chloe's words filled Jasmine with warmth. She wasn't just building a business. She was creating a community, one that supported each other. Jasmine was determined to make this structure more fair and accessible to people like herself. That evening, as she closed up the office, she saw Harlan standing outside, holding papers, clearly preparing for another confrontation. But Jasmine wasn't afraid. She met his gaze with the same unwavering confidence. Did you need something, Harlan? She asked calmly. He squinted at her but didn't speak. Slowly, he turned and disappeared into the darkness. Jasmine could feel the fire inside her burning brighter. She had overcome so much, and now she wasn't just fighting the system, she was changing it. Weeks passed, and Jasmine could already feel her life transforming. The building had become both her home and her workplace, and the respect of the tenants and employees confirmed the value of her efforts. But today was different. Today felt special. Mr. Harlan appeared in front of her office, clutching documents in his hands, his resolve clear. Do you really think I'll give up that easily? He barked as he barged in without knocking. Jasmine looked at him calmly, refusing to rise to his provocations. You lost, Harlan. You no longer own this building. He threw the documents onto the desk, his face contorted with rage. You don't deserve this. His voice shook with fury. Jasmine stood before him confidently, almost emotionless. I deserve more than you can imagine. You didn't lose because I'm your victim. I won because I chose to fight. Harlan fell silent, his face turning red with shame. He clenched his fists, but no words came out. He realized that all of his threats were meaningless. You can't humiliate me like this, he muttered, almost inaudible. I can, and I will as much as I want, she replied calmly, maintaining steady eye contact. Mr. Harlan turned without a word and left. Jasmine stood in the silence, knowing that this moment was her victory. She was no longer the person who had been oppressed. She was the one who controlled her own fate. With a smile on her lips, she looked at her building. The victory wasn't in what she had taken from Harlan, but in what she had regained: control over her own life.